Phoenix program was created by the CIA in Saigon in 1967, aimed at neutralizing through assassination, kidnapping, and systematic torture the civilian infrastructure that supported the Viet Cong insurgency in South Vietnam. It was a terrifying final solution that violated the Geneva Conventions. Phoenix program was designed to neutralize Viet Cong tax collectors, supply officers, political cadre, local military officials, and suspected sympathizers through assassination. Faulty intelligence often led to the murder of innocent civilians, which contradicted the tenets of the Geneva Conventions. Rival Vietnamese would report their enemies as VC in order for U.S. troops to kill them. In 1971, head of the CIA in Vietnam, William Colby, testified before the Church Committee. The number of killed was 20,000. South Vietnamese government figures were 40,000 dead. CIA officer Nelson Brickham and later Ted Shackley managed 600 military and 40 to 50 CIA liaison officers, working with South Vietnamese officers in 44 provinces. These Vietnamese special branch functioned like detectives and managed the CIA's gulag of secret interrogation centers. Ted Shackley and Robert Comer played key roles in recruiting Phoenix program personnel. Many covert action officers were refugees from the Bay of Pigs fiasco. They ran the CIA's counter-terror CT teams, assassination squads. Comer, Colby, Shackley, and others reported to Richard Helms and the White House. The Phoenix program was conceived by the White House and supported by the CIA. It called for neutralizing 1,800 targets a month. About a third of the VC targeted for arrest were summarily executed. In 1962, Ted Shackley became head of Operation Mongoose and used mobster Johnny Rosselli as part of the plan to assassinate Fidel Castro. He was also responsible for recruiting spies in Cuba. Most of the anti-Castro Cubans that Shackley managed to infiltrate into Cuba were captured and either imprisoned or executed. The same fate as many Montagnard and Hmong tribesmen used against the North Vietnamese. In 1966, Shackley was placed in charge of the CIA's secret war in Laos. In 1968, Shackley became chief of station in Vietnam and headed the Phoenix program. Shackley recruited Tom Clines as his deputy, and David Morales. In 1975, the Church Committee investigated this matter and identified the riflemen assigned to Shackley in this program. Bay of Pigs veterans Chichi Quintero and Felix Rodriguez. Both men later became commanders for the Contras, smuggling drugs into the U.S. to pay for weapons. Phoenix also employed hitmen Frank Sturgis and Rolando Martinez, along with their supervisor, E. Howard Hunt. All became famous later as Nixon plumbers caught burglarizing the Watergate Hotel. Ted Shackley and his deputy, Tom Clines, were the higher-ups of the Iran-Contra scandal, Shackley handling the Iran arms side and Clines the Contra end. Shackley also played an important role in the assassination of elected President Salvador Allende in Chile. In 1975, George Bush was head of CIA, and Shackley was promoted to Deputy Director of Operations, number 2 in charge of covert activity. CIA Director Admiral Stansfield Turner later forced Shackley to resign from the agency in 1979 due to his unauthorized dealings with rogue agent Edwin Wilson and former CIA employee Frank Turple, who were selling plastic explosives to Libya with Shackley's approval. Had he not left, Ted Shackley would likely have become head of the CIA. In Vietnam from 1965 to 1968, the U.S. intelligence services maintained an active list of VC cadre marked for assassination, calling for neutralizing 1,800 targets a month. A third of these VC were summarily executed. Security committees and provincial interrogation centers determined the fate of VC suspects outside of judicial controls. Green Berets and Navy SEALs would assassinate suspected VC sympathizers or cadres, assassinating, for example, Cambodian officials suspected of collaborating with the North Vietnamese, or South Vietnamese suspected as collaborators and double agents. In 1982, an ex-Phoenix operative revealed that sometimes orders were given to kill U.S. military personnel who were considered security risks. He suspects the order came not from division, but from a higher authority such as the CIA or the Office of Naval Intelligence. The following testimony is from Vincent Okamoto, combat officer, a lieutenant in Vietnam in 1968, and recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award conferred by the U.S. Army, wounded 3 times. Quote, "The problem was, how do you find the people on the blacklist? It's not like you had their address and telephone number. The procedure would be to go into a village and just grab someone and say, 'Where's Win so-and-so?' Half the time the people were so afraid they would say anything. Then a Phoenix team would take the informant, put a sandbag over his head, poke out 2 holes so he could see, put Como wire around his neck like a long leash, and walk him through the village and say, 'When we go by Wynn's house, scratch your head.' Then that night, Phoenix would come back, knock on the door, and say, 'April Fool, motherfucker.' Whoever answered the door would get wasted. As far as they were concerned, whoever answered was a communist, including family members. Sometimes they'd come back to camp with ears to prove that they had killed people." One of the Phoenix program architects, Robert Comer, after leaving the Pentagon said, quote, I would have done a lot of things differently and been more cautious about getting us involved. He called the war a strategic disaster which cost us 57,000 lives and $500 billion. Comer then worked as a consultant for the RAND Corporation, writing classified studies on NATO and on the need for a rapid deployment force for the Persian Gulf. In Vietnam, there were 3 existing programs. The Hamlet Information Program. CIA and Special Branch recruited informants in the hamlets. Some informants were blackmailed. Others did it for revenge. Money was the most common motivating factor used in recruiting people as informants. Under the Provincial Interrogation Program, the CIA began building a secret torture chamber in each of South Vietnam's 44 provinces in 1964. Finally, penetrations into the Viet Cong infrastructure using blackmail or terrorizing a member of the targeted individual's family was used to gather information. Every Vietnamese over the age of 15 had to register and carry identity cards. These records were computerized, eventually evolving into a highly computerized and statistical means of generating 1,800 names a month for the target list and coordinating the information from 30,000 or more informants on who was a VC cadre or sympathizer. When the Strategic Hamlet program failed, CIA and military intelligence concentrated on the Phoenix program, a terror campaign aimed at the civilian population instead of winning hearts and minds, to win by using the threat of assassination and a terror state to defeat the North Vietnamese. Many non-political Vietnamese were arrested and tortured and in effect forced into the resistance army of the North.